Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to today's Projectworks podcast, a conversation and community for high growth consulting firm leaders about what it takes to build an AI era consulting firm. My name is Dominique. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Projectworks, and I'm joined here today, as always, with our CEO, Mark Easton. Hi, Mark. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm really good, thank you. You having a good week so far?
Yeah, enjoying the first week that feels like summer here in the Bay Area.
Awesome, very cool. Teasing us here for the Australasian crew and anyone in New Zealand particularly cold
Yeah.
this week. I am also joined today by a customer of Projectworks and a really great one, CEO Mark Easton. Two Marks on the podcast today. Mark is the CEO of Nodero, a software consulting firm that he's founded himself and has grown to now over 30 people. So welcome, Mark. Really cool to have you on the podcast today.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, great to be here. Looking forward to it. I've been enjoying using ProjectWorks and just being part of this journey. Looking forward to sharing and talking through.
Awesome. I am really excited to have you on because today's topic is around client acquisition cost. And you and I have actually had some really good convos about how you've grown your business and how you go out there and find customers that you can work really well with. And I think it is one of the least measured numbers in professional services firms, like, what it actually takes. What is the cost it takes for you to win and build your customer base? I have a history of heading up sales and account management and consultancy firms. And I found that we really focused on metrics around project delivery and margin, but sort of the client acquisition cost is almost this like black hole or this area that wasn't as measured. And in the early days, as you're running really fast, sometimes that's okay. But I think sometimes that becomes quite a critical part to measure, looking at the efficiency of your firm's growth. And today's episode, we're going to do in two halves. So first, we're going to work through some of the core metrics. So we're going to share some slides and sort of establish what we're talking about with client acquisition costs so that we're all sort of singing from the same song sheet. We're going to talk through some metrics and concepts behind the episode. And then it's very cool that Mark Easton has joined us because he's going to talk about some of his experience based on what this actually looks like inside a consulting firm today, how he's investing in growth, what that looks like for him, and acquiring new customers. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And remember that as you go, please share comments and questions in the chat, and we will always try, as we do, to cover as many as we can. So I think let's kick it off by sharing the slides. Thank you, Jacob. And let's have a look at really what is a healthy client acquisition cost. As we have in previous podcasts, we've started off with this maturity model. And Mark, do you want to talk to this a little bit again, just to set the scene for everybody?
Yeah, you can see at the highest level, we've kind of broken down growing your firm and operating your firm. Today, we're going to focus in on growing your firm and really on these kind of higher three levels, which is how do you make your growth repeatable, which I think customer acquisition cost becomes a real key to that. Team selling, which I found running Nexient that you had to get everybody on every team helping you sell, and we'll get more into that in more detail. And then the efficiency is the customer acquisition cost comes back in terms of the lifetime value and then the ratio of how much you spent to get the client and then what you got back over the lifetime of that client. And that really helps you figure out if the client's helping you make money or losing you money.
Yeah, which is pretty important for a growing
Yes.
firm. Yeah. And I think really important to start off this podcast with, like, what do we actually mean by client acquisition cost? So when we're talking about this, we're talking about the full cost of winning a new client. And most people, I think about that non-billable time that your billable people might spend getting to win that client. So it's really the cost of winning work divided by how many clients you've actually won. And there's a few examples of that down the bottom there. Mark, I think, a few of these always go into the pit, the hole, the thing that people try not to look at too much, when you're celebrating winning that big new deal. Am I right?
Yeah, for sure. And really, like you kind of assume your sales and marketing budget at some level is a fixed amount, but you really do need to look at that as well. Like how much are you spending there? And is it driving the return that you want? And then all the other, non-billable folks that are involved. As you said, the hours from your probably your most valuable people on those early meetings, and then whatever direct expenses you have. One other note, well, you'll hear a lot of software companies talk about CAC, or this client acquisition cost or customer acquisition cost. But and as we get into it, you'll see I'm not sure it's the right fit for a consulting firm. It's something I actually wanted to kind of talk about and debate a bit, because as most of you probably experience, when you get a new client, you're really just getting started. And at least my experience was almost like you get a pilot project, you better not screw it up. And if everything goes well, then you kind of get permission to keep working and begin to expand your relationship. So it's more the beginning of the journey than in software, where often that customer is onboarded and they begin to really use your product. So yeah, something we can debate together here.
Um,
And maybe
and
the alternative might be customer lifetime cost. This is something we were debating. So the idea here being, if you have a acquisition cost or CAC that gets you to that pilot, then how much more do you have to spend to get through the pilot into hopefully more and more work? And on an ongoing basis, how much are you spending that is really sales or marketing costs to an existing client?
I agree, because I think in consultancies, depending on your size or makeup, you might have a sales team or a salesperson that goes out there and hunts out new business for you. And then it's sort of, once you've won that business, it may go over to your delivery team, and you might have a senior delivery person, which is what you were saying, Mark. Treat this client really well in the hope that they'll give us more business. And there is a lot of non-billable time that goes into that. It's on the slide here talking about meetings and expenses, or the extra work you put into that first engagement. Mark Easton, it would be interesting to get your view on this. Is that what you're finding with your team, that once you win a new client, it is really about sort of a test maybe in that first run?
Oh, absolutely. It's a test. It's often a lot smaller than the lifetime value of the customer. We're always looking for long-term relationships with clients, rather than that sort of one-off. And I guess from a finance point of view, it is all together, but it is quite different activities and quite different people involved. And it's quite probably easier, that CAC, when you look at marketing costs and you look at doing events and all the things you do to win new business. But to grow, there is that bucket, and it's different people who, their normal salary might not go into your sales and marketing budget. So it does become a little bit murkier and probably harder to separate.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, do you think you're tracking that in any way at the moment? Like, do you think that goes into just sort of like unbillable hours, or, affects potential utilization for your more senior people, or probably yourself? I imagine you spend a lot of your own time doing this.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a work in progress for us. I think we have gone from having a bit of a pit of a time bucket for pre-sales activity, or in client activity that would go as an internal cost, and moving towards putting that towards clients. In Projectworks, we've started having specific buckets for our client that aren't necessarily connected to a specific project, more for those conversations before you're really committed to a project that you want to track and manage budget. So as I say, work in progress. But I think it needs to happen. It needs to happen.
And for me, this is one of these hallmarks or these indications as a consultancy grows. If you're 5 people and you win a piece of business, then it's probably natural or innate that the founder and so the key people are ringing and checking in with that customer. They're probably coming to those meetings because you've got a small amount of customers and you're very hands-on in everything you do. Once you're scaling, once you're to 20 or 30 people, that, like everything else, becomes something that you need to have a system behind. You need to say, well, it should become standard that for every new customer, we get a senior stakeholder to check in 2 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks into the project. And it does have something that you have to sort of put a system behind to make sure that that's repeatable across all of your projects, no matter who's, on the team on that particular engagement. And I think that is the difference between, that as you were saying, Mark or Tongue, the potential like a software opposed to a consultancy and that ongoing farming.
Yeah.
So if we think about framing up that rather than client acquisition cost, and we think about it as a client lifetime cost, I guess there is sort of like, it depends, like what healthy looks like depends. And Mark or Tongue, it would be interesting to get your view across this around sort of these different factors.
Yeah, I think this is a great way to frame it, because it really does matter kind of what kind of work you're doing. Are you able to get into a client and expand and get long-term, multiple years relationships going? And ideally, you get really large, $500,000 a year, maybe even more than that out of a client. Or there are a lot of firms that are doing more like an implementation, one project, it's pretty quick, and then they got to keep going and do the next and the next. Um, so what kind of work you do is really important. How much you can repeat that is really important. And probably the third one here, maybe the most critical, is what is your account margin? Are you able to generate 30 or 40% account margin or more? Or are you on a pretty tight 10 or 15 or 20% account level margin? And those really affect the payback time. And sort of what's your kind of your cash flow, and you really want to think about that payback.
And I think part of this, an area I'm quite passionate about, is really knowing your ICP, knowing your ideal client profile, because that means that all of those different elements are so much stronger along the way. But having real clarity, especially as you grow, I think, in a consultancy, of who are your ideal clients, and, that are like where they are, the business size, the industries they're in, means it's easier to have a look at that and go, well, because we want customers that are going to grow. We want customers of this size in this industry, because we believe that their lifetime value will be higher, is what I would anticipate around there. So I think this is a really important piece of work to do. I think, like all startups, if you're a small agency, you're sort of like, the brief is, I will take whatever work is going. If someone wants to talk to me, it's the same as sales. If someone wants to talk to me, I will take the meeting. When you grow and scale and potentially bring on the first salesperson, you want to be able to point them really clearly in the direction, because if they're going to be reaching out to 100 businesses and working to get meetings with them and then get work, you want to make sure that they're going to ultimately be the right customer for you. Does this resonate, Mark Easton, a bit? I imagine there's probably, over your time, you've done a bit of work across that and identifying your ideal client profile.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's one of those things that's always a bit of a work in progress. Like I'm constantly working with our growth team, saying, look, we can't be comfortable with our positioning and the way we kind of come to market and who our ICP is. We have to constantly be, trying to, really specialize. It's so easy to be capability led and all those sort of things, as opposed to sort of problem and outcome and ICP. And I think as well, that the economic climate changes, and it's sort of, you suddenly start feeling you need to take, again, even if you've been going for a while, it changes, how far outside ICP before we green light it. But I guess as you mature, starting to put metrics in place, that's where all of this sort of, understanding these things, the lifetime value and this cost, it only comes once you start actually going, well, what are our profit margins on per project and per client and, per offering, and suddenly, just numbers driving these things, it changes things a lot. But there's a lot that's gut, right? That why do we keep having this problem? Well, it's the same type of client, again and again. It's like, right, let's disqualify them quickly if it's not going to work.
Yeah, some really great points. And I love what you were saying as well, is it's sort of always evolving. And I think sometimes that happens with consultancies. You open up and then you're like, well, apparently we are specialists in this area. It almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that you suddenly have some great case studies, which means you win more work, which means they're growing customers. So I do think that can sort of evolve as you go, and market obviously plays a big part in that. And so you spoke to this, or just referred to this around the lifetime value. For a profit a customer generates, it's really across their entire relationship with a firm. And I think that's different. If you're winning a piece of business that is a standalone project, say a 50,000 standalone project, that's quite different to a customer that might have 10 50,000 projects over a 3-year period. So it's like really how many projects and their value and their margin. And I also think around this, which is quite interesting, we're talking about like what it takes to win a customer. It's quite different 20 years ago or even 10 years ago to what it is today. So I think you've got some interesting perspectives around, running a consultancy, say, 10 years ago, Mark and Ortung, and Mark Easton now running one today in this sort of climate of people moving faster or different ways of reaching out to customers. Mark Ortung, for lifetime value, how did you used to think about that when you were running your teams?
Yeah, we would look at overall margin contribution from the account. So we'd try to take all of the costs and allocate them to the client, even if they were sales and marketing or other things on an ongoing basis, and then calculate what we called an account margin. So it didn't include bench or any of the practice leadership or anything, but it was all costs associated with that account. And that single metric was pretty good at helping us understand the health of that client. If it was 35, 37 and a half, 40%, which was kind of our range that we would operate within, we knew it was pretty healthy. We would often at the end of the month have clients in the 25, 22, 21, like that we knew were not healthy. We'd have to dig in and try to figure out what was going wrong. Quite often there would be the best of intentions, like we're going to just give them a couple of resources to help them with this one problem they mentioned, and nobody would do the math on how much that would just tank the overall margin of the client. Um, so it was a constant battle to keep all of our clients at a really healthy margin and keep them all happy. You're sort of juggling all the time.
And I think we've got some examples of what that might look like just to play that out. I think we've got, say you had 5 projects, 150K budget and a 30% margin. That's your customer's lifetime value there, 150,000 up here on the screen. So then you're thinking, what did it cost to win them? And, if winning and retaining that client took around 30,000, with your expenses and your team's time and what you're sinking into that, then, this is essentially the lifetime profit. For every dollar you spent winning the client, what you actually paid back on. So I think this is sort of a formula. I don't know if you want to talk to that a little bit more, Mark Ortung, as well, how you think about that. This slide talks about what healthy might look like.
Yeah, I think one way to think about it that a lot of investors come at it is if I give you $1, how many dollars will you give me back in this machine that you've built, right? So if I give you 1, you give me back 3, it's not great. If I give you 1, you give me back 5, it's pretty healthy. And if you can give me 10 for every 1 I give you, it's awesome, right? So that's one kind of simple way to think about it, which I really like. And this kind of all boils down to effectively that math. It's never as clean as that because, they don't really give you the dollar. And it's like we were chatting earlier, like go spend $10,000 on a conference and then hope it's going to fit into one of these formulas and be the 10 to 1 in the long run. But when you're spending the $10,000 on the marketing event, you have no idea if you're going to win clients or how much they're going to bring back or how long they're going to be with you. So a lot of it you learn kind of as it happens or maybe even after it happens. So you have to just keep adjusting, and a little more terrifying than it sounds when you just do the math, because you put in the money up front.
Yeah, I think these benchmarks are really like just so useful. I think it's something I've really latched onto in the last couple of years, especially if you're I would say as a company, we're still quite immature in the use of metrics, always want to be a lot more than we are. Certainly a big sort of push at the moment. But when you don't have a lot of data around, how has it been to date, or maybe you're too small for the numbers to really be that significant, just knowing, hey, look, 5 to 1's healthy, or 35% profit margin on a client's good, or 25% growth on a client is good. Just having those starting points and then sort of they may change because, as you know, what the other slide said, every organization is unique, and your mix of resources and the types of projects you do. But at least it's a starting point, and I think that's super helpful to sort of pin your sort of mast on the wall, kind of work towards it, and then adjust as needed.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it is a challenge. It's like you were just saying, it is a challenge, that growth and profit really do pull against each other in consultancies, which is sort of, if you think back to that very first slide, that we think those are two tracks that you really need to be focused on. Your metrics, how you're operating and how you're growing go hand in hand. And, growth does cost hours. It really takes time spending people to do that. But often it's one team with two jobs. So your senior people have to really operate your projects the best they can at the best margin while working with those customers with a sales growth lens. And there was a question as we were chatting in the chat from Ryan about, do you have samples of how this can be implemented into Projectworks well, e.g. capturing and transferring upfront costs to customers so this is measured effectively? And we are at the moment launching a consulting CRM and proposal feature within Projectworks. And the idea is that within Projectworks, this will start. So rather than starting when you start off a project, when it's already confirmed, that you will have some deal management and AI proposal building so that not only can you save time, but yes, the idea is hope that as this part of our product evolves, there will be the ability to capture that pre-sales time. So that you can really get a full view of the margin on your projects, because we know, as we've just been speaking about, that all starts way before you start really getting your delivery people kicking off on day one. All of those conversations in that time takes a big effort around there. So now that we have established what we're talking about around there, I really want to make sure that we have some time to hear from Mark Easton, because I think Nodero has had such a great growth story. And I know, as you've said, you've been really focused on some of those metrics. So, Mark, I would love you to really, set the scene for us about, just tell us about Nodero, how you've grown it, and what did winning look like in those early days for you, if you think back to the very early hustle days.
Yeah, sure. So we're turning 15 next year. So it's not, it's certainly been a moderate growth. I started it as a software engineer, essentially as an umbrella, probably like many people, just doing consulting, and then sort of grew it from there. But it was really about 5 years ago, making that decision to, hey, let's sort of put a bit more sort of fuel on the fire. And I just certainly a lot of education, a lot of training around, very focused growth. And I think it ties in very well to Mark, to your the maturity model that you have for consultancies. This has all been done before. There are such great books out there about the stages and what to do with an organization. And I came from very much, as I say, a delivery point of view, and so it's been quite easy for us to raise up a leadership team around delivery. We do software, we do a lot of project delivery now too. It's about half what we'd consider traditional development against the surrounding design, analysis, project management, testing, and that sort of other work. And so that's I always felt like we've brought up excellent people from within the company, but the growth journey has been a much more intentional and I guess sort of point to point sort of process over the last 2 years, and it's been really, really exciting. And I think we're still absolutely a work in progress. I was saying before the show that we have a dedicated salesperson day 4. So it's asked me in 6 months how that's gone, but it's been a 2-year journey and quite an intentional one. There's just so many, I guess, agencies and consultancies that have bad experiences around bringing in a dedicated sales function if you don't have that from early days, or you're not coming from that background. So I've been quite intentional about sort of laying the land with marketing, first with external agencies, then having someone internally within the company, take ownership of that. Then again, with sales, uplift and capability of our existing staff and that sort of seller doer model, and sort of trying to uplift for that sort of the farming, the account management. We have such fantastic relationships, but being more intentional around the growth in that, to moving towards, hey, we actually need a dedicated function around the hunting, around the new clients, because it's a different skill set. So yeah, that's sort of the journey we've been on.
No, it's very cool. And I know you and I have spoken about this before, so I love your story. I think it's interesting what you were just saying there, kind of reading between the lines. You've been in business for a long time, focused on, delivering, having excellence in delivery. A few years ago, you're like, right, going to pour some fuel on this fire. And you went for marketing first over sort of like, often some people bring in a salesperson, expect to sort of pound the pavement. What was the decision behind that, and thinking, it felt like it was a real brand focus for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Nodero is traditionally a regional consultancy. We started in central New Zealand, looking after our region, doing a bit of everything for everyone. That sort of that problem. And if you start, I guess, as we grow nationally, the old sort of adage of, hey, we're down the road and we're really great people. It doesn't cut it when you're trying to grow outside those sort of immediate relationships, of course. And so, like many organizations, it's that process of know, like, trust, and people just don't know us and certainly didn't know us. So I guess that's a lot of the marketing piece. And that's why I think especially this conversation around CAC is really interesting, because there has to be brand marketing as well as campaigns and offerings and that sort of direct click here and sign up. And I think we're a long-term, high-value projects, long-term customer relationship type organization. Sometimes it can take well over a year to build up, and so a lot of these things, you kind of have to again commit to the play. And again, I've been driven quite a lot by benchmarks, and sort of 5% on marketing is something that sort of jumped out, and we certainly didn't jump straight into that and go, right, well, we currently, maybe a few years ago, where were we, maybe $4 million, and go, right, boom, 200K on marketing. But certainly taking it seriously, if you don't come from that marketing world, that, hey, this needs spend, I'm going to commit to significant spend. It's not just, $500 on Facebook ads, and when I don't get enough sort of sign-ups, I just decide marketing's a failure. I think it's been a real intentional, hey, we are here for the long run, but we do also need to measure. And so there, I guess that marketing is about being known, and starting to be trusted and starting to differentiate. And certainly that journey of what's your positioning, who are your ICP, it's also tied in. So in marketing goes a long way in help forcing you to think about that.
I love that. I think that's really some really cool actual takeaways there when you're talking about. Thank you, because I think that's it. I think people, especially if they're running consultancy and they've come from being a great operator, it's sort of like, how do you start in that place? And we talked about getting that ICP, and I think marketing really helps with that. If you're going to about to spend, really put money, in marketing, you want to be very clear about who you're trying to reach. And so then ICP and being very clear at target markets is a big piece of work. For some tangible stuff for people hearing, you've obviously been doing this for a little while now. Do you want to talk about a couple of things that straight away come to mind that were definitely worth the bang for your buck, and anything that you tried that you probably wouldn't do again?
Oh, that's tough, because sometimes it is really hard to tie activity, especially when you're using external agencies or consultancies for strategic work. It's like a customer's using us. We're not cheap. And so when you're investing strategically in big sort of transformation, there is a cost to that, and it can be, as I say, very hard. When online t-shirt seller talks about CAC, and it's like, right, you put this money in Facebook and boom, direct correlation, put more money into there, make it grow. It's very rarely like that. And so much of what we've spent has lifted our maturity, and where we are today, making very direct decisions that are certainly easier to measure, are on the back of maturity from doing good stuff, and doing some of that foundational work, even if it was hard to tie that to value. The other, what would I say? I've tried really hard to stay true maybe a bit to my personality, and we say we are digital experts, human beings, and there's been a little bit of playfulness in a lot of our marketing, and that has worked really well. We did a video ad last year, and it's coming out to about 275,000 views. So for a consultancy, that's enormous, and I get people saying all the time that they've seen it, and and that's very cool, and it's a little bit fun in what can be a somewhat stale industry. Now, can I tell you we've got a whole lot of jobs off the back of that? No, I can't. And so I guess again, we're still on that journey of figuring out what's good spend and what's not. But I do, I'm very happy that we've brought on an excellent head of marketing who can push further than I would push, do things that I wouldn't do, and just take that workload. And I think that's been a huge success, because it's not just only about activation and activities, which an agency can be really good for, but that ownership, and that someone who's sort of living and breathing and really cares about, right, we need people to know us, we need people to talk to us and communicate with us. And so that has been definitely, I would say, the biggest win, alongside the various activities. Things that I wouldn't do again. Yeah, I don't know. I guess certainly early on, we really struggled with copy and copywriters, and I don't know if we didn't find the right people, or it's just really hard to get your voice. I think the consultancy world is quite a unique one, and certainly a lot of the information online is maybe more of a traditional marketing agency type stuff, or product, as you've sort of mentioned, around SaaS and software product. And it does have its own space. The fact that it is these long-term relationships, the fact that it's so easy to be dry and hard to get cut through. And so, yeah, we didn't have a lot of success with that, and it would often come back to me. So yeah, I mean, I can't even come to you with a solution to that.
No.
I think that was tough, and there was probably a lot of spend that was frustrating.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think interesting you say voice, because I often, when I meet with people in consultancies that want advice on how to hire a great salesperson or how they might set that up, I often say the first thing that you want to identify is your ICP, because as I alluded to earlier, if you are hiring someone within your consultancy to sell, you want to be able to point them in a very clear direction, because often with consultancies, it's not a quick 2 meetings and close sale. You want to identify a list of customers that are your ideal customers and say, I want you to build relationships with these people. And it might take some time, and it might be through events, through comms, through them seeing videos. It is hard to directly link, because I attended this event and met with them and shook their hands, I got to bid for a piece of business the next week. And I think you actually just came off an event, Mark, didn't you? You just came off this week in an event in Auckland, where you were saying you had a really good breakfast. Can you talk a bit about that, like the sort of events you do, and who goes? You go? Do some of your senior members of your team? Because it's also cost out of the business, talking about those billable people.
Absolutely. We've found that certainly like online advertising, Facebook ads or whatever, we haven't had huge success with that type of marketing spend. We've committed to events. We probably are going to 6 this year, which is quite a lot. I know a lot of groups will do 1 or 2. So we just went to the New Zealand CIO Summit, and it's just, the digital leaders of New Zealand, really, like the caliber of attendees is really high. There's some really excellent speeches. I got to sit in on a couple, and really really good stuff. Not fluff. But we hosted a breakfast, and that was amazing. That was a couple of them said to me, is about 12 guests and four of us, and they said that was their highlight, because these summits, they can be full on. You're either behind a booth or you're an attending, and there's sort of the hustle of the floor, and then there's sort of intense presentations which are half sell, and having something a bit more low key where people can just sort of hang out with other CIOs and talk about your wins and talk about things you're actually doing. And we're very intentional in those, for them not to be a strong, or not even a soft selling moment. It's really building that relationship. And obviously we want, that's an investment. We want to be able to hopefully say, hey, that was interesting that you mentioned. Let's have a meeting. Maybe there's some way we can help, and being authentic in that. So of course we want the outcome, but it comes from, for us, a very sort of low pressure approach. So I think events, especially in this age, even now, content, LinkedIn, it's just very hard to cut through that. And of course, the amount of AI just like makes that everyone's a thought leader, everyone has playbooks, and some of them are great, but it's just, there's so much content. And so finding ways to connect with people and be, people in this world, and sort of connect that way, I think it's a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah, awesome. Now, there's a question here which actually is a good one, around, I guess, a little bit of like being the founder and transitioning there. And it's a question from Blake that says, how do you balance your time between marketing, networking, events versus in-house work, and also the balance between maintaining existing relationships while really going for that growth? It'll be interesting, since you've been doing this now for, like you've made a real step change a few years ago. And I think this maybe sits around to like, what is the shift in being everything, and then maybe needing to get some, leaders, or, when you need to sort of level up in that area? How do you balance all of that and know that you're spending the right time in the right places?
For sure. Well, that is really hard. And I think it's something I talk with other business leaders across huge industry, variety of industries. And you kind of, and especially if you are on this growth path, I was saying before that the show, that you feel like you're doing all the things all the time. I don't mean at an operational level, but you've just got your mind on, right, we need better metrics, and we need to be more, more structured in our account management, and we need to reach out better, and I should be posting on LinkedIn more. And so it's just all these things all the time, which sort of had this low grade. I think in terms of, as I said earlier, I've been very lucky. Had really good people to bring into leadership operationally, as well as just all my staff. And so I've been learning on a journey of trying to uplift and grow people, to be able to take some of that, and people have certain clients they resonate with more, and they can take more of that relationship, or they really enjoy people and culture, and so I'm not the one organizing social activities, and that's a sort of, but but that can apply across the business, of course, and then bringing in experts as needed, and being okay with spending. We've had, we've brought in fractional people as needed, and sometimes that's really great, sometimes that's more difficult, but still, I guess, being willing to invest in areas that need to, not be you all the time. And I think, say around marketing and now sales, it's that ownership. It's not it's not for me to factor, hey, it'll be good for me to call this client or this prospect, but I've got a million other things to do. It's someone who just has that ownership of responsibility. I think, I want to move to this place where I don't have, well, I have responsibility about strategy. I have responsibility about managing my leadership, but I can sort of be a fly on the wall to any one operational area, and I can dive deep when I need to. But the burden is not on me. And so I guess just being intentional, once we get sales humming, I imagine, people and recruit will be the next, because that's, obviously with growth, it's that hand in hand of, hey, we've got to sell. Hey, we've got to have the people to do it. And again, we're in a place where I will spend an afternoon spinning through LinkedIn looking for green circles to find great people. So, that's got to go eventually as well, of course. And so I just think things in the right time, though. We've been we've been sustainably growing, as I said, for 15 years, and we have put a small focus on, but it's, there are businesses I know, and certainly hearing your story, Mark, about the sort of, you joined a business at 40 million after 5 years, and then in another 6 years, you kind of next leveled it. And I think it can be sometimes a bit daunting. It's inspirational, but also daunting hearing these stories of where other businesses are at, and every business is unique, and so working on the inputs, maybe not being so fixated on the timeframes. As long as you're enjoying the journey, then that don't have to obsess too much about that.
One thing I'd add to that is when I joined, it was 39 million, and the first thing I did over 2.5 years was take it to 34 million. So it's like, it's not all easy. It's not all
absolutely
up. So like, just keep that in mind. Just keep trying stuff, keep learning, and hopefully you find the right mix.
And I really loved what you were saying, Mark Easton, about, I could really hear some themes in what you're talking, is you just tried some things out. It sounds like you maybe started with some fractional or working with an agency, and then, as it got stronger and stronger, you saw the need to bring it in-house. So I really love in your story of talking about how you sort of took the leap, but you weren't like, right, I'm going to carve out and immediately spend this 5%. I'm going to start testing some different things and get our tone of voice and get, our ICP, and now, you've got full-time team members and you're going to, 6 events a year, but it's like there is some steps before you go, all out in that way. And so it is a very cool story to hear. And thank you for being so open about how your journey and how you've been going to win work. I think it's very, very cool. I think it's a place that I would say most consultancies want to get to when you think about those two tracks. You want to have great work that you operating really well, but then you want to get to a point where you have the time, energy, and focus to really to put that big swing behind growth. So that's been really great. So thank you very much, Mark, for joining us. And
pleasure. Yeah, no, it's been good.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. It's always great to see so many of you online. Thank you both Mark Ortung and Mark Easton for your time. I think it was a really great chat about growth. We are going to be back in 2 weeks, and we'll be sharing some simple ways that you can reduce back office admin with the help of AI. That should be a really good one. The link will appear in the chat soon to save your seat. And I'm sure you'll get some emails and comms and about that. You can find us all on LinkedIn, and make sure that you subscribe to Projectworks Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. We will see you all in 2 weeks. Thank you, Mark Easton. Thank you, Mark Ortung. Lovely to see you both and have a good chat. And I will see you both soon.
Thanks, Dom.
Thank you.